Our whole life is shaped by decisions, but there's 3 decisions you're making every moment you're alive. And the way you make these 3 decisions shapes your destiny. And when I was 11 years old, we had a really, really tough Thanksgiving where there was no money and no food. And it was the worst experience of my life. It was the most crushing experience I felt. And then a miracle happened. Bang on the door. So I go answer the door. And I answer the door, and standing there is this giant man. I was this little boy. And he's holding this huge box of food. And beside him on the ground was a black pot with an uncooked turkey in it. And he said, "Is your father home?" And I said, "Just one moment." I was like, this is a gift from God. This is going to change it all. This is going to make my mom and dad happy. It's going to be unbelievable. And I said, Dad, there's a guy at the door. And he goes, "Go, you answer the door." I said, "I did. He's got to see you." So I said, "Dad, you got to come." Walks to the door, and I'm waiting there, just can't waiting to see his face. And my dad opens the door, and this man's standing there with this big box of food. And my father did not get happy. He looked at this man, and he raised his voice to him, and he said, "Look, we don't take charity." And then he took the door to slam it in the man's face. But the man was a good-sized man. He put his foot there and smacked his foot and bounced back over. He said, Sir, this is not charity. Everybody has tough times. Somebody knows you're having a tough time. And they want you to have a magical Thanksgiving. I'm just the delivery guy." He said, "Please take this." And my father said, "We don't take charity." He went to slam it again. And this time the guy put his shoulder against it so he couldn't do it. And then the guy said something that I'll never forget, and in moments I wished he hadn't said. But he found a way to force my father. He's holding this thing, and he looked at me, and then he looked at my dad, and he said, "Don't make your family suffer because of your ego." Now my dad's level of energy increased, but he was also trapped. So he took the food, slammed it on our table, and slammed the door in the man's face, and never even thanked him. And I remember that day just thinking, I don't understand. And years later, I began to understand it a little bit. Years I figured out, our whole life is shaped by decisions. That's what we've talked about today, right? But there's 3 decisions you're making every moment you're alive. And the way you make these 3 decisions shapes your destiny. First decision we're all making every moment is, what are you going to focus on? What are you going to focus on? I realized that my father's life and my life ended up very different because we made that day 3 decisions very differently. He decided to focus on the fact that he has not fed his family. The second question is, as you're focusing on, what does this mean? What does it mean? And the bottom line on meaning is, if you think about it, you get to make up the meaning, and most people pick the worst one, don't they? That day, my father decided to focus on the fact he hadn't fed his family, and I know what meaning he gave because he said it out loud over and over again, that he was worthless because he had not taken care of his family. And then the final and most important decision you make every moment you're alive, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? And I'll tell you what he decided to do. He decided to leave our family shortly thereafter. 3 years ago, he passed away. He died alone. I was the only one to go to his funeral. No one else in the family would go. And I can tell you, right before his death, he got the lesson because he looked at me and he said, "Son," he said, "I was a bastard. I didn't connect with anybody, and look what I'm dying of." And my life turned out very different than him. But what changed my life was the meaning I gave it. I decided that day that what this means is that strangers care. And if strangers care about me and my family, I decided what I was going to do is I was going to care about strangers. And that completely changed my life. I promised myself someday I'd do well enough to do this for other families like was done for me. I realized in that moment that the worst day of my life, my father leaving, had actually been the best day of my life. Because if I hadn't had that experience, I wouldn't be here today. And now because of that, I'm get to live this life. And I have the desire and the drive and the want to give it this way. I tell you the story for a couple reasons. One is, if you want to change your life, figure out how your worst day was your best day. You'll change everything, because it is if you look for it. If you find the deeper meaning, it is. And last year, we fed over 1 million people now in 9 countries around the world, on Christmas and Thanksgiving. It's been a pretty amazing experience, right? Thank you. Thank you.